Craig, it's great to see you.
Likewise.
I'm Julie Annixter, and I'm the executive editor of Innovation Excellence. And this is the continuation of a series of conversations that we're doing with innovators. And I'm delighted to be with Craig Swann, the founder of LoopLabs, tonight in New York City.
Yeah.
So I know a little bit about your background, but I would love for our audience to understand, first of all, in a nutshell, what is LoopLabs? I know it's a disruptive music service, and where did it come from?
I mean, LoopLabs it's an online music studio that pretty much is breaking down the barriers to creating music. We've seen the breakdown of so many different abilities, like we've talked about, in terms of whether it's 3D printing or citizen journalism through blogging or Instagram or videos, but music's been left behind, and we've seen it through the history of music since the dawn of the internet. So it's really this free online place that people can come together and make music together. And that's sort of at the forefront. And to where it came from, I mean, it was way before its time when I was sitting in a parking lot at a Grateful Dead show in a drum circle. I had just seen the internet in 92. It wasn't really the internet, but exposed to it through the university system, and just thought, wow, on many levels, what would happen if a world could connect and do what we were doing in that parking lot through technology? And promptly dropped out of university to pursue that, realizing it's way ahead of its time. But it got me into the internet at the very, very early stage. I got to grow up with the technologies, adopted a technology called Flash, kind of became, that was my go-to technology, was a real leader in that space. And as soon as it was possible to do interactive audio, I jumped on the possibility and created sort of LoopLabs 1.0 in 2001. And it was the first time the internet had ever had a way to make music online and remix and share stuff. And it just took off by storm. It picked up, a Webby Award, a South by Award. I mean, Steve Jobs used it to demo Safari when he first came out, which was amazing and awesome. But what had happened was every single brand in the world was like, well, this is an amazing technology. We need to leverage this, and we want to license it and want to do these cool marketing campaigns. So as a young person with an interactive agency, I saw the awesomeness of doing that, which led to about 10 years of rolling out these campaigns for projects. What was learned during that process was, number one, creating these consumer-facing things that were targeted at a young demographic, so it was made to be easy to use. It had to be to do this. But at the same time, millions of kids were coming on these platforms by top brands like Coca-Cola or Microsoft, and then 3-6 months later, they took it down. And it was very frustrating in my soul in terms of wanting to create this platform and making good money doing it, sure, and getting a lot of exposure, but there was no place for it to exist. And so in the last couple of years, Google's rolled out a number of technologies, web audio being one of them, and decided to jump straight in and let's build a platform for the world that can really allow these possibilities to happen. And that's what we've been doing, and it's been a heck of a ride.
So from a drum circle in a parking lot after a Grateful Dead concert, to creating interactive audio experiences for major brands like Coca-Cola and Microsoft, just and an interactive agency to support all of that. Just give us a sense of when one of those big brands was using the technology, what were they doing? How were they creating? Because I know, brand experience is a big deal, right? So they were using music to create a brand experience. What did that look like?
It looked very similar to kind of how it looks now in terms of the experience, but you'd have a Bacardi DJ saying, how do we embrace this DJ culture and allow people to make music and share it as a part of a marketing campaign that tied in music? Or interesting things where a Sprite said, hey, maybe we can have people remix and create the music for a commercial with LeBron James, so they would be able to score that. Really interesting ways to use this interactive way of people coming online and creating. But again, just limited by the fact that they didn't have the foresight to say, why don't we just keep this going and build on this as a brand even? I mean, I'm surprised none of them said, why don't we do this for a year or 2 years or extend it, because they saw the massive engagement, they saw the numbers coming in as we did, but to them it was just a short-term thinking, and I think that's just where that broke the model down from our perspective.
Well, not being foresighted may have meant that they were short-sighted, you know? And what is interesting to me about what you're doing and what has fascinated me from the beginning is when you talk about this platform, you're really recognizing the creator in everyone. And certainly the domain of music producer has been kind of an elite, only certain people can, have that title and walk through that door, right?
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about what LoopLabs enables anyone to do.
So, I think one of the things that we learn by watching people interact with technology like this, and we use the analogy a lot of, the piano, and the first approach that a child might have to piano, where they can reach up and they're hitting the white keys and they're like, hey, this is music. And then Pinky will hit a black key or two. And all of a sudden there's this dissonance and this feeling that this doesn't sound right. Maybe music isn't for me. It's this complicated thing that I don't understand, and these notation I don't really follow. And I think for us, music is math. And so there's a lot of things that technology can do to make that kind of go away. And so we do a lot of things to make sure that with the tens of thousands of sounds that we have that you can play with and build with, everything is automatically mashed into tempo, so everything is always playing at the same speed together, which is a big part of music and rhythm. And more importantly, it's harmonically matched, so that with this huge collection of world sounds that we have, if I'm listening to a piece of piano in a certain key and a guitar in a different key, traditionally two musicians playing that, it would just sound terrible. And again, that feeling of this doesn't work together. Well, with the math of music, we can transpose that into the same key. So now all these building blocks like Lego pieces can be snapped together to really quickly make really good sounding stuff that sounds good together. And that's the first step, I feel, to empower, and not just anyone, but a child in particular, where they feel like this is fun, I can do this, I want to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And as they do that, they realize that maybe music is for them. And you know, we often talk, maybe we'll be that gateway for them to pick up instruments and to get into more sophisticated music if that's what they want to do. First and foremost, make it accessible and make it accessible by being fun.
So the name LoopLabs, which I just think is a great name because it says what it is. You have a lab. It's an online platform where people can do things with loops. Right. So what is a loop?
I mean, it's a repetitive piece of music. And it's funny when you say that, because the name has been around for some time. But even when you listen to what's happening in music on the radio, a lot of it is really the same music playing for 3 minutes, just with sort of someone singing and doing things on top of it. So it's that idea of these repetitive pieces of music, but when you combine those on top of each other, they take on a larger loop or a larger meaning. So it becomes easy to use those pieces. I mean, sure that you can record yourself on the platform and there's samples that you can use that are one-off samples, but it's that idea of just, I mean, you see what is happening with, whether it's Instagram or with Vine now, it's the Vine loop. And this idea of this repetitive, animated, I say GIF, people will say GIF, but I'm old school, animated GIFs, all these things are these looping things. And it's sort of embedded into part of our culture now, almost, this idea of these things repeating. And I think it ties in really well into the accessibility and sort of the very quick turnover rate of the kind of creation that we see in pop culture.
So you're essentially enabling anybody, a kid, an adult, a musician, a non-musician, to take these loops like Lego pieces and connect them into a bigger loop, and then what? They can share them, they can store them, share them. What happens? What happens to the loop?
Right. I mean, the first thing people generally, when they create something, they want to share it. They're so proud and impressed with what they've done. So you can share this off to your social networks. You can put it onto Twitter and Facebook. And one of the really important things about the collaborative nature of our platform is that when you post your music on Facebook, for instance, if you make it remixable, which is a big part of culture and a big part of the community that we're building, you hit that button and you're instantly pulled right back into where they created it, and you can add on your own vocals, you can change pieces and kick it back. So it's very viral in nature in terms of this thing that is, it's collaborative, and it's meant to be this thing that's not fixed in the old days where an artist said, this is my album, and it's not going to change, this is how it's supposed to be. That's not how things are now. It's very fluid, and you see what's happening with the memes of the world and how that happens, where it's meant to constantly change and constantly evolve. And I think that's a big part of it. So it's just really, Snapchat's a good example of what it's done for photography in terms of it. Photographies and photos are now part of our language. They're not something that captures a birthday or a wedding or a travel vacation. It's a part of the language. And I think a big part of what we're doing is enabling that to happen with music, which hasn't happened before.
So talk to me about the kind of music. Is it original music? The whole thing with Taylor Swift and Apple and copyright and ownership. And where does LoopLabs sit in sort of the copyright world?
It's a very complicated thing. Many people don't realize that there's even 2 copyrights with music, unlike most pieces of art. So everything that we provide to people, and there's tens of thousands of sounds, it's all royalty free. So you're free to create this stuff in a way where you're not harming or impacting anyone's copyright, and you're creating your own piece that's accessible to the world. You can choose how available you want to make it, whether anyone can download it or remix it, or whether you keep it for yourself. But for us, it's very much about creating a new sense of culture inside of our community where people want to share things, and they feel this is how music should be, and it's not so much about ownership but changing it. And two, no, really that's it. It's really about enabling that.
All right, so when you talk about community, first of all, who is the community that created these tens of thousands of loops? Like, right. Did you make them all? You and Braulio?
So certainly, we work with a lot of interesting partners who have provided these sounds. We also work with a wonderful team of people that are engineers and producers that have put sounds into there. So that's where it's been seeded with a lot of great partners from a content perspective. The community itself ranges everywhere from, we actually have an 8-year-old who's almost like he's our boy, DJ Mission, to we talked to a woman that's 67 years old who was a flautist and was a musician, can no longer do that, and has found this is a new way to express and create and use music as a therapeutic way for her to release almost. So for us, it's about breaking down those barriers. We're not aiming at a demographic. We want everyone who's never made music to realize that they can make music and to continue to make music, and then that will bring in a whole world of people to collaborate and contribute with.
Well, I have a proof of concept because one of the first times I met you, you guys showed me a video that you had made, I think, in the Dominican Republic,
right,
with a bunch of young kids who'd never, maybe even used computers before, and they were just going to town.
Yes.
So it's pretty intuitive, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that comes from those years of licensing a technology to brands that were targeting a younger thing, that it became much easier to use. And that's the one thing we get. People try a lot of these tools that are expensive on platforms, and they're just too complicated. They're just way more than they need to just have fun. And I think that's one of the great ways that we reduce those barriers just so that people can enter the world of music.
So as an amateur musician, I know I was drawn to Guitar Hero and struggled, to make anything actually really happen on it. So there's this whole notion of the design of the interface. So can you talk a little bit about how the user interface and the user experience is creating this sort of intuitive simplicity that can suck people into this global drum circle?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of complexities in there. They're just kind of hidden away, and that's been a real challenge and comes from those years of doing it. We look at the complicated games that kids are learning to play. They're not simple, and they can manage and master those things. It's really it's drag and drop and paint stuff on. It's really couldn't be much simpler there's not a whole lot beyond that in terms of starting to make music. As you start realizing, well, how would I make this music get louder over time? Okay, now I can get in and add an envelope and do those things and get more sophisticated. But that comes out of more that now how do I do this? And it's that exploratory wanting to understand what the interface can unroll out to you to use. But first and foremost, it's drag sounds in, everything sounds great together, paint it on if you want it there, if you don't, just stretch it. It's a very fluid, very flexible, elastic type of interface that seems to be very intuitive.
So I get how you're making this available to the public, and I know there have been a couple analogies floating around. One was Google Docs for music. Another one is Minecraft for music,
right,
for a younger generation. But I also know that you've got a lot of partnerships with the music industry. So maybe talk about how are you networking and weaving together LoopLabs with a more professional space?
I think there's a lot of opportunities. I think from the beginning, we always saw LoopLabs as being the hub of a very large platform inside of a huge ecosystem, which is music. Some people look at it and say, well, I'm a musician, I would never use that. This is too simplistic for me. And that's great. That's not meant for you necessarily. However, when you have, let's say millions of kids that are now actively producing on a platform, the number one thing they want is content. They would say, how do I get these new sounds in here? So now if you are a musician, if you're a person that is a trained pianist that can do stuff, or you're a producer that makes hip hop beats, or you're any other type of person that's producing at a high level, the opportunity to open up an app store, if you will, a marketplace for these sound packs, enables all these people to contribute. And I think the exciting thing is we're creating this new market of people that didn't exist, this sort of casual music creator, and we're creating these new products that can be sold to them and monetized. So I think there's a huge opportunity by creating these new products to do that. And even if you look more at the traditional system, which might be the music labels and the publishing world, we're seeing more and more that there's not money made in music. That chart that just kind of goes down, music sucks, the industry's going down. But the interactive and app world has been on the inrise. You know, I mean, and I think it's that lack of that short-sightedness of them not seeing how to get music interactive. Where if artists can start to think about music being interactive and think about an interactive single where they put their music in a new format, where a user can say, you know what, I don't want to hear that piano. I'd like to put this in, and let's try putting this drum beat instead of this, and to sort of play with it. You have this transformation where they move from a consumer into a creator, and even more so a collaborator with that artist. And what better relationship as an artist and a fan to be able to have that relationship? And it's really that IKEA effect where if someone else spends 30, 40 minutes creating some masterpiece with this artist, they may never have bought the original piece of music, but when they've invested this time, they want to share it. They want to be able to play in the car, bring it to a party.
When they know it, it becomes part of them.
Well, they put the value back into music, which has been fading. And I think there again is an opportunity. If you looked at monetizing music, someone will pay $1 for the music that they created, because now it's not a Kanye track or a Katy Perry track. It's my track. Yeah, okay, they're on the track, but it's my track. And I think that is another possible and powerful way for an existing establishment of musicians and industry to get involved in a platform like this.
So one of the things that's really interesting to me about creating in general, whether it's music or art or dance or the performing arts or writing, I think that when you create, it gives you agency, it gives you a kind of power to not just express yourself, but to make a mark in the world that is unlike anything else. And it's liberating. It's, as you said, once you start going, it just can kind of keep evolving in so many different directions. So, but I do think, and I'm a little bit biased, even though I really wasn't trained as a musician, I played some instruments, I do think that music as an art form has something very special. And we talked about this when we first met, about the universality of music and how music is a language that can connect, sort of head, heart, and gut to anybody. And so when I think about LoopLabs being this global platform, I mean, it just makes me want to know what your sort of ultimate dream for it is.
I mean,
why are you doing this? Because you've spent a lot of time. 2001. I mean, that's 15 years ago.
92 was when I first thought about it.
So my God! Well, that's even longer.
But it's
you don't even look that old.
Yeah,
music. We're 12.
Music is that. It's that connective tissue you speak about that really does connect us all. I mean, being a hippie at heart, it's this rhythm of life. We come into life surrounded by the beat of our mother's heart. These are the sounds that we grow up with, really, before we're ripped into this, crazy, chaotic light, sound, all these things, and we're pulled away from this music, this rhythm of life. And I think a lot of us spend our lives trying to get back to this place of comfort and warmth and where we really truly come from. So for me, it's always been about how we can enable people to get to a place where they feel that they're in touch with that, because it's creative. It's not attaching to somebody else's rhythm that they've created, that they can contribute in this global thing themselves. And I think, we use the analogies of when people are making music with people around the world, as humans, I think we've lost this ability to really have a true respect for each other, especially people that we don't identify, whether it's race or religion or geographic location. But when you're making music with someone, there's a deep appreciation for the fact that you're connecting together. And I think if you realize that this person might come from the Middle East or from somewhere in Latin America, when things are happening in those areas and you hear about things on the news, I think there's this new formed, that's my boy that I make beats with, and I wonder what he's going through now. And I think the ability to connect people that way, to have an appreciation for us as just souls and humans, I think music is one of the only things that truly can connect us like that. And if we can have some small or large role in doing that, I mean, that's what it's about.
Well, what's interesting, Craig, to me is that often it is a big vision or a dream or inspiration that empowers somebody like you to keep on innovating. And you said you first had this idea in 1992, so you've been at this for a while. What has given you? And it's funny because I was just at a conference where somebody said that they thought the most important quality for an innovator was to persevere, which you clearly have. So first of all, I forget, so forgive me. Are you a musician or were you a computer engineer? Like what was your training and your background?
I mean, I'm a bit of both, but not even out of necessity. I'm not really trained in either. It was more I grew up with computers at a young age. I was 10 years old playing around in the BBSing, which was an early form of the internet. And it was funny, it was near the same time, I remember hearing, Jimi Hendrix Star Spangled Banner from my neighbor's yard and going, what is that? What is it over the hedge? And he said, that's Jimi Hendrix. I said, no, but what is Jimi Hendrix? He goes, that's a guitar. And I was like, I have to learn how to do that. So it's been more a love of just wanting to express myself and play with these things that has sort of been that nice mixture that's brought me to a place to see how they merge. But it just comes from an inner place. It's not a trained social kind of thing.
So the appreciation for music and technology comes from, your interest in everything you were surrounded with as a kid. Mm-hmm. What has allowed you to persevere and build LoopLabs from an idea at a drum circle to something that is now a very connected global platform? We have tens of thousands of loops and all these really interesting people coming on board to support you. Like, where has all this perseverance come from? Because this is decades now that you've been building this thing.
Well, I don't know if it's the answer, whether it's just the whole destiny, fate thing, I'm not sure, but I do remember a story that my mom actually reminds me of once in a while because I forget about it. But, the day that Elvis died, I think I was about 5, it was right after my birthday. And I said to my mom, I'm going to change the world. And my mom was like, what a weird thing for a 5-year-old to say. And, she thinks now that perhaps it's just part of a path that I'm on, but I think it's just there's such a power if you can actually, I've had 100 people making music together. It is a spiritual experience. And I've seen other people that have not had that be moved by it. And I want people to reach that level of being connected, because I think, especially in a disconnected world now, everyone's missing that. And I think as I've seen the rise of technology, I've also seen this disenfranchising element of culture and of people and of just not being connected in the way that I grew up as a child. That part of that has been a drive to do it. Also seeing that slowly the vision was coming closer to reality, that I was way ahead of the time seeing it, but slowly I see things emerging and converging into this actually being a reality, that it's like, okay, this can happen now. Before it couldn't, and I was just waiting. And as it happened and the opportunities were there, I just embraced the ability to keep moving it forward. And now it's at a point where it's just been validated by everything in the last 5 or 10 years that it's just, this is going to happen. And it'd be silly to stop now, I guess.
So how can, Innovation Excellence goes to 175 countries around the world, and we have 150,000 people, showing up at our site. Each month is 90% crowdsourced, which is very much in line with what LoopLabs is about. How can they, do they go to looplabs.com? How can they get engaged?
That's it. You
Just
go to looplabs.com,
go and start playing.
Sign up and start playing. I mean, it really is that easy. And, I think there's a lot of wonderful opportunities, I think, moving into the mobile front. But it's that simple. We've tried to reduce as many barriers. I mean, if you use Facebook, then you can just connect through your Facebook and take away a couple extra steps. We just want to make it as easy to get in there and start making music with people.
I want to bring up one other topic, because you touched on it. Anything you do that is serious in life, any job, any career that you pursue, always brings a lot of stress with it, because, life is stressful, and if you care about something, you're taking risks, there are ups and downs. And I think that innovators in general have a lot of stress that is often hopefully balanced out by their passion, and they're driven to fulfill it, like you have been. But I also think that music is a fantastic antidote to stress. Mm-hmm. I know for me it is. And I know that sometimes when I'm just feeling completely out of whack, if I will just watch a concert, or plug in my earbuds and listen to one of the 500,000 songs, it just takes me away. Exactly. And sometimes on the train, I will just listen to music for an hour and 45 minutes and float into New York City and start my day that way.
Fantastic.
And often I'll listen, funny thing about the loops, to the same thing over and over. I've got a couple of friends who've made music that I just love. So just talk to me about that. What do you is it like that for you, or what do you think about music and stress?
I think music is a way to connect with a part of yourself that you're not in touch with. And when you get in connect with that part of yourself, all the other stuff kind of dissolves away. I certainly think that we see it happen all the time. Music is this thing that everyone loves. It's a part of everyone's life. I mean, speaking back to the 67-year-old woman that we recently met on the platform, she actually said, this is therapeutic for me. This is a way, this is my musical medication, if you will, because you kind of take yourself out of your situation, out of your body, and music is one of those beautiful things that's left and right brain. You know what I mean? There's very few things that sort of trigger both those things at the same time, and I think there's a magic in that connection that allows us to take away, and whether it's stress or just enjoyment, it's just, music is magical. I don't think anyone understands exactly why it is. We could get really deep and talk about how everything is a vibration, and through that we're all connected, and that's how everything exists. And we could do that. But I think that ultimately it's just one of these things that's invisible too, right? I mean, music is this invisible thing that just kind of gives you a hug. You know, we can't point to it. We can't really do anything but feel it. And I think that's one of the reasons that it's so comforting.